like to call the meeting of October 28th to order. All members are present. We have just adjourned from an executive session for the purpose of discussing strategies with respect to collective bargaining with the New England Police Benevolent Association, Local 101 dispatchers, and also to approve a number of minutes from previous executive sessions. Would you please all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, before we begin the meeting, I want to thank all of my colleagues and the town manager's office for all wearing an article of pink in honor of Breast Cancer Awareness Month in October. So thank you all for doing that. We have transmitting Treasury warrants 16, 16A, 17, and 17A. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. And we have the approval of 2 minutes from March 12th, 2018, and also June 24th of 2019. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve March 12th, 2018.
Second for discussion. I'm just
Please.
wondering, March 12, 2018, it's 1 year and 7 months. I'm just wondering why we're getting that now.
There was a backup clearly with the minutes. That you'll recall, we had the situation last year where we had multiple folks that left the office, and so we were kind of under siege to some measure.
Very good.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion and second. All in favor?
I would be abstaining.
Thank you.
I
I'll also be abstaining from this one as well.
Okay, so we have 3, 4, 2, and 2 abstentions.
Correct.
Motion passes. We move on to June 24th, 2019. Is there a motion?
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And those are unanimous. Thank you. We'll move right into our first appointment. I know the reason we're all here. We're very excited to hear our first presentation, and that's with Teresa Hugh Smith and the Girl Scout Troop 62457 with the request to obtain an open space for a community garden. Young ladies, welcome to the meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Thank you guys for being here. You guys want to sit right there, or do you want to come up to the podium? It's up to you. Or do you want to come up and stand in front? How about a nice round of applause? Well, let me tell you, I've only been doing this 3 years. I think that was the best presentation I've heard in the 3 years I've been here. Thank you so much for being here on a school night. I see the superintendent's here. Maybe we can get you a pass for tomorrow on your homework. But thank you so much for bringing this. I think this is a great idea. You guys have obviously put a lot of work, a lot of thought into this, and I think this would be a great addition for our community. So I know how I feel, and in full disclosure to the audience, I already made a deal with the troop before the meeting. We talked, right, girls? Yeah. And I promised that I would vote for this tonight if you did what? Did your best in school, okay? So that's my two-piece. I know the other members might have something to say. Mrs. O'Mahony?
Oh, I get to start first tonight. They usually make me wait till the end.
Not
I want-
tonight.
Not tonight. It's a whole new world. Girls, I'm very proud of your presentation. It's clear that you put a lot of thought into what you wanted to tell us tonight. I think it's awesome that you've already thought about where the produce will go. And I just want you to know whatever help you need to let us know, because that's what we're all here for. And I hope you guys come back to tell us after the first harvest, the things that went well and the things that you're gonna work on for next year, okay? Do you promise you'll come back? Because I have to say, not only is this the best meeting, and obviously everyone came to hear you guys tonight, but
That's right.
that was the best Pledge of Allegiance we've done since I've been on the board. So if nothing else, if you guys can come back and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I would definitely appreciate that. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you. Mr. Eden?
Just to dovetail off of what Ms. O'Mahony said, I do hope you guys come back, and I hope you girls bring cookies. What's so funny? I want to applaud your initiative and your leadership on helping make Wilmington a better place by helping beautify it and also help to grow some vegetables for those who need it. So, girls, I'm very impressed. Very good job, and you've shown an awful lot of initiative and leadership here, and I'm very proud of you, and I'm sure your parents are too. So, thank you very much.
And as well, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I think the chairman said it well. We're speaking up because evidently the microphones aren't working tonight. But girls, I gotta tell you, all right, I got a little bit of a slight of a weight problem, as you can see. But I wish you were around 50 years ago, I would've had fruits and vegetables as opposed to the Swanson TV dinners that were wrapped in foil that you had to put in the oven. So, once again, but I'll tell you what, if, just between us, if you come up with the Girl Scout cookies, I'll buy a box from each of you. All right?
Thank you, Mr. Kyra.
Yeah, awesome. Actually, I'm hoping that they buy a box of cookies for me, never mind just for them. But I want to recognize the parents and what they do and for the children and this troop and getting them involved in the community, keeping them active. It's just outstanding. Congratulations, girls, for what you're doing for our seniors. I can't wait to see what the garden looks like. I go down there with my dog, so I'll see it. I think it's down near the dog park they're talking about putting it. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping that you do come back and tell us how everything has progressed and how everything goes. So have fun with it, and make sure you always thank your parents and tell them that you love them and thank them for helping you do this project. So good luck. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Mr. Hull?
And I was just going to note, this is now the second project, at least that I'm aware of, the first being the book kiosk at Rotary Park. So just a great example of giving back to the community. So I really want to thank each and every one of you for coming up with this idea, and we will work with you as much as we can. So thank you very much.
Awesome, and we also want to recognize your troop leaders are here, and we thank you both for your efforts here. One last thing before we go to the vote, we're gonna call for the vote, but before we do that, I wanna make sure this is your big moment on TV. There's about 25,000 people watching at home. But if you wanna introduce yourself and say hi, Mom, to the camera or something, you guys wanna give us your names? You wanna start down the end? And our troop leaders are here as well.
Teresa Sue Smith. I'm Heather Campbell.
Well, thank you all very much. Okay, so here's the moment you've been waiting for. I'm gonna call for the vote. Fingers are crossed. Anybody would like to make a motion to approve the community garden be put on by this wonderful Girl Scout group?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion's made and second. Is there discussion? I do have one piece of discussion. This is a shameless plug, but I understand in your proposal, you guys are in the need of a total of $471 to complete this project. So we're gonna put out a plea to the community. If anybody wants to help this group out, they need a total of $471. And so if anybody wants to help them out, let us know, and we'll make sure that the money gets to your troop. So I hope my friend from the Lowell Sun will let everybody know, and I'm sure the Wilmington Apple's here and Town Crier. This is great. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Please.
For discussion, I'll tell you what, I'll up the ante and I'll donate $50 to the Girl Scouts. How's that? All right?
How about it? I can't resist. We have 50. Do I hear 60? Okay. We're gonna it's getting late. I know it's a school night for you guys.
I was
We'll
gonna say, I know a group of special women who are meeting tonight on a different board that I'm involved in, so I will be bringing it to their attention, so hopefully, We're One Wilmington will also be helping you guys out soon, okay?
Great. All right, here we go. This is it. All in favor? It's unanimous. Congratulations. All right. Come and take a picture. You gonna take a picture? You gonna take a picture? Stu, you're gonna be in charge here? All right, girls, come on up and take the picture. We're gonna go right in front of the table here. Stu's promise is front page, right? Right. Above the fold. Above the fold. Got it. All right, let me take a big step to the left. All right. How happy can we be, girls? Thank you very much. All right, girls, thank you so much. How about a nice round of applause? That was great.
Yeah, that was nice.
If you go over, I promise not to laugh until I know you're okay.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
It's the truth. I didn't say I wouldn't laugh.
We'll just give them a minute to file out. I know they're eager to get home on a school night. Okay. That was great. That was wonderful. We're going to transition to our next appointment, which is what brings us all here. I want to welcome our friends from the Facilities Master Plan. If you guys would like to come up to the table with the microphones, please. And as Mr. McCoy mentioned, we are having technical difficulties with the microphones. They are live on television, but obviously, if you're going to say something here tonight, if you don't mind speaking up, so you can be heard. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
And thank you all for being here. We want to welcome not only our friends from the Facility Master Plan, but the school committee, the finance committee, and several other department heads. Our state representative is in the house, so our superintendent of schools. Thank you all, members of the community, for being here, and what I believe will be the very first portion of a discussion that will probably take some time, much needed time of the near future, and I look forward to that discussion. Tonight, we'll see a presentation from your group for the first time in a long-awaited period. We have no formal votes on the agenda tonight, so we look forward to hearing your presentation. I know you guys have worked really hard and a long time. The town invested a lot of money into this resource that you've put together for us. and we look forward to hearing about it. And then we'll give the committees an opportunity to make some initial comment if they'd like, and then the Board of Selectmen if they have any comments or question. And then I'm happy to open it up to the audience as well. I know we have some folks here who came for the Girl Scouts but stuck around for a little bit, so. But before we begin, I'm gonna give the manager an opportunity to help us figure out how we arrived at this point. But before we do that, I'd like to pause. I recognize that we are without a couple members of your committee. Miss Diane Allen is out of the country, she couldn't be here. But I also want to take this time to recognize formally Mr. Joe Perella, who's no longer with us. Joe passed away in May, served on this committee, also the Permanent Buildings Committee, and the High School Building Committee. And so I only didn't know Joe well, but had the opportunity to meet him a few times. And nice gentleman who I always found to be very thoughtful. He was a quiet man, lived in town his whole life, and ran a construction company, but was what Wilmington was all about, gave a lot of himself for volunteer efforts. So I'd just like to pause and remember him. And also, another very special woman to all of us was our former superintendent of schools, Joanne Benton, who served with you folks as well. So if we could just pause and reflect on those two before we begin, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Now at this time, I will turn it over to our town manager, Mr. Hull.
So let me, first of all, just outline what the basis for this facilities plan was. Back in 2015, when this was brought to town meeting, the recognition at that time clearly was that we have a number of aging buildings. The town has done a masterful job, quite frankly, of repurposing various buildings. This building that you're in used to be the Glen Road School. In 1985, it was repurposed as a temporary town hall. The senior center, as everyone knows, was a former school. The Roman House was a house. It's now being used for administrative purposes. The public buildings office, where our maintenance crews are, was the former fire station. So we've done a great job of extending the life of many of these buildings, but I think we are reaching a point where a number of these buildings we have to give some serious thought to either significant renovations or, in some cases, outright replacement of buildings. And so one of my thoughts at the time was, rather than addressing this on a piecemeal basis, we ought to be looking at our buildings, all of our facilities, really in a comprehensive way. This is not unusual. A number of communities around the Commonwealth have done this. Needham, Somerville, other communities. Corporate America does this as well. Analog Devices, which is a company that we all focused on a couple of years ago in terms of working with them. They have companies all over the country and around the world, and they look at their facilities in a global way. So the idea at the time was to have a firm that has experience in looking at buildings, whether it's private or public, and developing with us a series of options that we could look at for dealing with this on a long-term basis. Clearly, one of the issues that we have to be mindful of is the cost. Certainly a lot has been talked about with regard to our free cash, and we've been very fortunate through the efforts of my predecessor and our department heads to be able to build up the free cash number, which is essentially the available funds that have not been expended. But when all is said and done and we looked at this plan, it's about $143 million worth of projects, everything from replacing schools to making improvements to the Harnden Tavern. All of that collectively is about $143, $144 million worth of work, and that was done, projected in fiscal 17 or calendar year 17. Given the economy, those numbers only go up. So spite of the fact that we closed the year last year with a little over $18 million in free cash, and we have $14 million in capital stabilization funds, there's still going to be a requirement that we do some borrowing in order to deal with these facilities. So I guess one of the things I just want to try to focus on, I think the intent, or what I would hope to see come out of this meeting and others that follow, is to develop a degree of consensus or get some input as to whether the facilities plan that was put together is relevant. Are there parts of it that people on the various boards and committees and residents at large still believe is appropriate to go forward with? We should be looking at the buildings, trying to come together, get some consensus around the buildings that need to be either modified or replaced, the sequencing of that work, and ultimately the financing. So those are just some initial points. I would also just mention that the facilities plan clearly established, and I think we knew this going in, but it clearly established that one of the buildings that needs to be addressed, amongst others, is the senior center. The senior center was a great effort at the time back in 1986. My understanding is, and this was before my time, but that the seniors were meeting over in the plaza on a very limited basis. So through the efforts of a number of people in the community, the Bazell Center was repurposed for a senior center, and it served that purpose well for a long time. The facilities plan clearly established that there is a need for a new facilities plan, and to my knowledge, there has been no one either on the Board of Selectmen or in the administration that has disputed that. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about the senior center and whether that's a priority. I can say personally it is. The challenge is going to be where that gets sequenced with all the various other projects that we have. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chair.
Thank you very much. And so without further ado, Mr. Hooper,
Geez, I think
Floor is
Jeff
yours.
covered it all, so we're pretty much all set.
maybe you want to introduce the members of your committee.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. My name is George Hooper. I am the chairman of the Facility Master Plan. Next to me is Valerie Gingrich. She's Director of Planning and Conservation. Teresa Manganelli on the Finance Committee, Facility Master Plan. Paul Malorani, Permanent Building Committee, Facility Master Plan. John or Jack Holloway, Permanent Building Committee and Facility Master Plan. Way down the back is Paul Ruggiero. He's with the school department. He sat in as interim superintendent. A few other members that are not here, as stated, was Diane Allen, and Jenny Barnish from the school committee sat in a few times. What I'd like to do tonight is give kind of a broad picture of what we went through when we started back in October of 2015. We started going through the whole process, kind of the big picture that we had. The town has 28 facilities, which include 8 of our school buildings, just over 750,000 square feet of our buildings, and the ages of these buildings vary from the 1800s to our new high school, which opened in February 2015. The operation and maintenance of these buildings, of course, you know, costs money. The town has supported a lot of the capital improvements over the years that have helped the efficiencies of our operating systems for these buildings. The goal of the Facility Master Plan was to take a look ahead at the next 20 to 30 years, where we're going to be. What are we going to do with these buildings? A detail on what we want our town to look like, how it's going to serve our community, and where we're going to spend our money wisely and effectively looking at the long-term costs, where we should renovate, where we should upgrade, where we should replace buildings that serve us, where we should utilize town-owned land to relocate, replace our aging facilities with new construction. The Facility Master Plan is designed to be a strategic plan to help prioritize which directions we should move in. The plan is not written in stone, it's just meant to be a guide. Each part of the plan can change, can be tweaked over time. It's made to fit our needs, our vision of what we want Wilmington to look like. Each part of it is going to serve the community, and everybody's gonna have the opportunity to vote on what we're going to do at the town meeting. So it's gonna take a community to do this. Even though we worked on this, it's gonna have everybody's input. After we had the approval for the facility master plan, it was the duty of the town manager's office to come up with an RFP, which is a request for a proposal. In 2015, to move forward with the facility master plan, the RFP was designed and developed by the town manager's office with the intent and purpose to solicit firms to establish a contractual agreement with a consulting firm that has the experience and knowledge for the planning, for the services, and the architectural and engineering design to help develop such a plan. The facility master plan for our town and school buildings will enhance the provisions of our town services and improve access to town facilities. To seek out a consultant to work with the permanent building committee, the town and school administrations to evaluate spaces, needs, and conditions of various departments, to evaluate existing town-owned properties, schools, and public buildings, to develop a long-term plan to address the needs of our community and its residents. The RFP had a scope of work. The chosen firm would have to assist the town with collecting and analyzing data and programmatic needs for its departments, create a general facility assessment by visiting each location with a team of mechanical, electrical, and structural engineers, studying design options for town-held properties, to evaluate project costs through the Facility Master Plan Committee, create dialogue to establish a priority and a schedule for future capital projects related to town buildings. This firm would identify the current schools and town-owned buildings or sites that fall short and satisfy defined programmatic needs to analyze alternate town-owned sites within the town that could satisfy these needs. This study would also involve the disposition of current town buildings or sites if declared redundant or past its useful life. Planning criteria included operating costs, current studies and code compliances, location, student capacities, student populations and enrollments, the conditions of buildings, and the potential to repurpose. The RFP process was due back on September 9th of 2015. The first meeting of the Facility Master Plan was in October of 2015, where the committee started the interview process to choose a firm. Of the firms that applied, the committee identified 3, the Cecil Group, Doran Whittier, and HKT. After completion of the interview process, the committee selected the Cecil Group, which is now known as Harriman. The Facility Master Plan held monthly meetings in Room 9 at the Town Hall. As required by the open meeting law, they were publicly posted, provided time for public comment on its agenda. We went through surveys, we had public forums. Valerie was very much involved with this. I will let her give some detail on what was provided.
Thank you. So the first thing that we did to reach out to the community was a survey that was done in 2016, and it was an online survey, and it asked questions about how often folks use certain buildings, the convenience of certain buildings, and what folks thought were the best buildings, the worst buildings, just to get kind of an overview of what people thought about our town buildings. After that, there was a public forum held in 2016 to kind of give an overview of the project thus far. And following that, the group came up with a series of alternatives to look at. So, and I'll go over each one. But we always had a baseline alternative that was having each of the town facilities in their current location and receiving necessary upgrades in that spot. So that was the baseline, and that baseline did do a few things that I'll mention. It had an addition to the library at its existing site. It had an addition to the senior center at its existing site. And it also combined the school administration with the town administration here at the town hall with an addition that, as you can imagine, is difficult with the round building. But so that was sort of the baseline alternative. We looked at another alternative that's kind of a typical New England town center type of idea, where the idea was to move the town hall and the school administration to over to the senior center site on the common, and then the senior center would move over to this site where it has kind of recreational abilities and space for things. Along with that, there was an idea to put senior housing, because we were asked to look at potential for locations for senior housing as well. There was an idea to put senior housing at the site next to St. Dorothy's. And this alternative also kind of included all of the baseline library expansion, upgrades to other buildings like the tavern and all of our other buildings. But those were sort of the major moves in that second alternative. The third alternative was to keep the senior center at its current site, but maybe move it around a little bit, create a new building there, and move the town hall, school administration to the next to St. Dorothy's on that site on Main Street. The senior housing would then be able to happen here at the town hall site. And the fourth alternative was kind of centered around the library and the idea of a new library at the common on the Swain site, and then the senior center moving over to the library site. So sort of a swapping of the senior center and the library to each other's sites. And senior housing would still be able to happen at St. Dorothy's, but all of the other buildings would sort of stay in their spots and receive upgrades in their spots. So those are the four alternatives that we looked out for the municipal buildings. The school options we looked at, we had a few more of those because there were two baselines that were considered. The first being schools receiving sort of just improvements to kind of keep them running. Whereas the second baseline was to improve those schools to meet space standards that the state puts out. So more of an upgrade and more renovation than just a regular baseline. But then there were four alternatives that consolidated some of the schools, and I'll go through each of those. The first being to create, I guess the idea behind it was to reduce the number of transitions that the kids have to go through in the schools. So the first option was to create 4 pre-K to 5 schools. So they would only do just that one single school. The next alternative was 1 pre-K kindergarten school, and then having 3 sort of elementary schools, grade 1 through 5. The next option was to do 1 pre-K school, and then 3 K to 5 schools. And then the last alternative that came up was to add on to each of our 4 schools, the Woburn, the Shawshene, the West Intermediate, the North Intermediate, to create 2 pre-K to 2nd grade and 2 3rd grade to 5th grade. And then the Boutwell and the Wildwood would be closed in that scenario. So those were the alternatives. You know, with those alternatives, we kind of went back out to the community. George and I did a spot on TV. I don't know if you saw it, but we did a little thing on WCTV. We put up these alternatives posters in the school buildings, in the town buildings, to gather thoughts from people. I did some road shows at the library and at the senior center, gathering some input. And then over the course of the committee meetings, we gathered input as well. So it's sort of an overview of the process that we went through, and I think George is going to talk a little bit more about the alternatives that were chosen for the plan.
Yeah, there were a lot of things, other than that we're discussing here, that were also brought into consideration. Utilities that are available at a lot of these sites, things that are available, gas, sewage if they're available, traffic that would be created. We looked at, like I said, town-owned land to see if we could relocate some of these things, what would make more sense. So after going through this, we looked at all of our facilities, and just want to be clear that not all of our facilities are going to need capital improvements. We typically, through the annual town budget, we use money in our operating budget to maintain and to do some of these improvements. We're talking more of the bigger schools, these bigger projects that have to be done. So not that all 750,000 square feet have to be addressed through this process. The conclusions that we did come up with was a new consolidated town hall and school administration building down at the former Swain School site location. This would create a civic center in our community at our own town common, which is something we really don't have, but this is what our preferred scenario came up with for our municipal facilities. A new senior center right here at the town hall site. This site has the space for a new ADA-compliant, modern, state-of-the-art facility that's adjacent to recreational facilities and open spaces. It has potential for a lot of growth here. A consolidated and improved DPW site with consolidating the water and the DPW department and a library expansion. And this is over, like I said, it's a 20 to 30 year picture for some of these projects, where some of the others have to be addressed sooner than later. It's all, you have to start small and work our way up, so we have to start somewhere. With our school facilities, the recommendation was to consolidate the lower grade schools to go from 6 to 4. The Shawshene and Woburn Street School would expand to absorb the K and pre-K programs, to upgrade all the spaces and meet educational standards and building codes. Where the North Intermediate and the West Intermediate School would expand to absorb the 3rd grade from the other schools, again, upgrade all the spaces to meet the educational standards and building codes. The Wildwood and Butwell School, as a result of this consolidation, would be closed. The 2 early childhood centers making these sites available for other uses, repurposing, or removal of the building. But this would consolidate the transitions for the students. Instead of going from 5, it would be 4 transitions. And then they would go to the middle school and to the high school. The last meeting of our facility master plan was held on January of 2018. So as you can see, there was quite a bit of time involved. The final report was presented to our committee, and it was unanimously voted upon. The vote was taken, the report was presented to the town manager, who presented that to the Board of Selectmen. At this time, I have a letter that I'd like to read from Diane Allen, who couldn't be with us, but she asked me if I would read this into record. This facility master plan, which took over 18 months to complete, should be used as a roadmap for the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, and the Finance Committee. It was a labor-intensive study which looked at 22 existing municipal buildings and 6 school buildings. These buildings are on are on, actually, it's not on the projector screen, but she has it listed here. Just to clarify, why only 4 schools were mentioned on this table, it's because the superintendent of schools, who was Joanne Benton, presented a plan for consolidation, which meant closing the Butwell and Wildwood schools through a phased process. The detailed explanation is shown on pages 119 and 120 of the report. This consolidation plan was presented to the school committee and voted in the affirmative at a school committee meeting and was included in the facility master plan. Mrs. Benton's short time spent with our committee and the consultant was both informative and creative and allowed the consultant to move forward with the necessary building costs to implement this plan. Our committee is in conjunction with our consultant developing a planned criteria shown on pages 9 and 10. This step helped the committee assemble a list of prioritized criteria so we could evaluate alternative scenarios and provide the basis for making the recommendations in this report. The criteria used in our evaluation were the following: cost and benefits, facility conditions, civic criteria, adaptability, and compatibility. In addition to the consultants, was prepared a town-wide survey which was sent out by the town, and the committee made a public presentation at the middle school on June 29, 2017. The appendages of this report include the questions and responses to the surveys in the public meeting. The consultant and the committee considered the public input during the review of our discussion. A cost analysis of each municipal building and school building was then prepared by our consultant and presented to the committee for review. This facility master plan has identified the deficiencies in the existing buildings as well as the needs for functional improvements to accommodate the services of each building will provide. The facility master plan also includes options for senior housing, which was voted on at town meeting via the amendment to be part of this study. For the reference, senior housing is discussed in this report beginning on page 36. We hope that the Board of Selectmen, the town manager, the finance committee, and the school committee here this evening, as well as the taxpayers, will use this report as a guide in preparing a proprietary list for capital and maintenance improvements to our facilities. Tonight is the first step in this process. Respectfully submitted, Diane Allen, Permanent Building Committee and Facility Master Plan Committee. Just so everybody knows also, there is a copy of the Facility Master Plan that can be found on the town's website, where it can be reviewed and printed out. At this time, I'll turn to my fellow members to see if they have any input.
I don't want to belabor the point. Everybody has said everything that needs to be said about this, I think, tonight, and it was an exhaustive.
Can you speak up? We can't hear you.
It was an exhaustive project. We noticed a lot of interested parties out there tonight. We see a lot of seniors here. We know the school people are here. This is going to be a town meeting endeavor. This is going to be voted on by the citizens of this town. But we feel that we've done an overwhelmingly exhaustive search into all of the town buildings and facilities. And it's all in the report. It's online.
I would just like to say that I agree with all the comments previously made. In past years, the town of Wilmington has taken advantage of the opportunities that would arise when a building was no longer used for its original purpose. We now have an opportunity to replan our community. We can bring the town hall to the Swain School, create a civic center, which will be desirable and attractive, build a first-class senior center on the town hall, and finally, resolve the issue of what to do with the Roman house. I look forward to all the discussions to come.
Again, like I said, this gives everybody the opportunity to be a part of where Wilmington's going. What are we going to do, how we're going to develop it, what the future holds for us. So everybody can be involved. Each one of these items will be brought to the town meeting and voted upon. So that'll be the time to get out and have your say.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you very much. You and your committee have worked diligently for 2 years, almost, on this report, and extensively given us a great roadmap in this report. I'm reminded of the old saying, measure twice, cut once, and I'm glad to see that we're doing that, thanks to the work that you folks have done. And because of you, we have this 122-page resource that we can refer to, and when the time does come for a town meeting vote, we can all make a very educated decision. So we really thank you for your time and your efforts here.
Thank you. There is a lot of good information in here. I would encourage everybody to take I mean, it's not a big read, so you can go through and see what we've came up with on the different scenarios and the information. And hopefully everyone will come out with the same conclusions, and we can move forward.
So, Mr. Hooper, what I'd like to do is give the opportunity to the school committee to make comment, and then give the opportunity for the finance committee to make comment before the board makes a comment, and then obviously open it up for questions, if that's okay with you. I understand if you have, it's a work night, and if you folks have, need to excuse yourselves, I understand, but we really thank you. It was long overdue. I know that there were efforts in the past to try to have this meeting take place, but you can see it's difficult to gather so many town officials at one time. So this is tremendous. So glad to finally hear your presentation. So thank you again.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to welcome up members of the school committee, and if the superintendent would like to join them, he's more than welcome. Sorry, thank you. They'll probably want to speak in the public comment, we'll allow it.
They're nice and warm.
Well, thank you, folks, for being here, Madam Chair. Thank you for gathering with us. I hope you were able to hear. I apologize about the microphone situation, but hopefully you were able to hear the presentation, some of the findings from the Facilities Master Plan. I want to offer you the opportunity to offer any initial comment or perhaps ask questions if you'd like.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce the school committee, or have them introduce themselves first. So I'm Jen Bryson, the chair of the school committee.
Somebody stand so we can hear what you're saying. It's kind of hard to hear anything over here.
Would you like us to stand? Is that what you would like?
If you don't
Chairman
mind, just for
Bender?
introductions, that would be great.
Should I stand during my entire statement?
Whatever you're more comfortable with.
Does that make sense? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Bryson from the Wilmington School Committee. I'm the chair of the school committee, and I'll have my colleagues introduce themselves, please.
Hello, I'm Steve Bjork, Vice Chair.
Hi, I'm MJ Burns, I'm secretary.
David Ragsdale, member.
Joe Newhouse, member.
Jesse Fenley, member.
Jay Samaha, member.
Glenn Brand, superintendent.
Paul Ruggiero, Assistant Superintendent of Administration and Finance.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'll start with a statement, and then I'll give my colleagues a chance to offer some additional comments, if that's okay with you. Okay. Thank you for welcoming us tonight and the chance to engage in the discussion around the future of the school facilities here in the town of Wilmington. Not including the high school and the middle school, we are here to discuss the physical conditions of our buildings. As was pointed out in the Facilities Master Plan, there are significant areas of need and investment to preserve and maintain the operation of all 6 school buildings. In particular, the conditions at the Wildwood School are most pressing in terms of its ability to reasonably accommodate students and staff for much longer, and I have a couple of examples. Wildwood, built in 1955, a lot of the interior finishes remain the same and unchanged. It is not possible to change or upgrade without disturbing the asbestos materials present. Mechanical systems are not reliable, especially the fact that the heat is the old steam heat system. single-pane metal windows that are not energy efficient, poor insulation from a building of the era that contributes to difficulty maintaining consistent temperatures. And one of our most pressing issues is the lack of confidentiality in our student support services. We know that our Facilities and Maintenance Department has worked hard to maintain the overall condition of our schools, and we are grateful. However, there continues to be growing concern related to the challenges in an educational and programming sense of operating the total number of schools at the elementary level that we do have. Examples of such concern include the number of transitions that a student and family experience on their pre-K to 5 journey, transportation challenges like time gaps between start and end times, the space to support teaching and learning in current times, in particular our special education programming. I'll list just a few disturbing details. At Shawsheen School, a physical therapist is storing materials and her desk in a storage facility that only has access through a bathroom. At the north, there are 5 to 6 student support service providers who all share one classroom, and because of student confidentiality, have to seek out alternative spaces like a staff room, a temporary empty classroom, etc., to provide services. Not all of our school psychologists have spaces to work or meet at some of the schools and have to be housed in the Student Support Services office at the Wildwood. Given this, we provide you the following. The school committee and administration welcome the collective support of town leaders and boards to realize the overall plan that is laid out in the facilities master plan, which recommends the pursuit of 4 modernized and expanded facilities to house all of our K-5 population. Given the condition of the Wildwood School, the district does not have time to wait for this longer aforementioned plan to come to fruition. This is urgent. We find ourselves at a place in which we need to pursue an interim solution for the students and staff of this facility. The school committee and superintendent intend to convene an official ad hoc committee to develop an immediate plan that can look at options to relocate the Wildwood School programs and services as well as the administrative office spaces. It is also our belief that we need outside assistance and expertise to help us determine viable options for us to consider in support of examining all of our options and helping guide us forward. Thank you again for your time tonight. We're looking forward to our continued work together on the important matter of our facilities, knowing that we all have our children's best interest in mind as we make decisions that impact their academic success and social emotional well-being. Thank you. So now I'll ask my colleagues if they have anything to add.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that before this meeting began, somebody spoke to Jen and kind of motioned the crowd and asked if Jen was ready to argue her side. I just want to make this very clear. The school committee is not taking sides. We are not, nobody here is opposed to a new senior center. I personally think that the town desperately needs a new senior center and has for many years. The people who attend that senior center, their tax dollars have provided us with new schools and our students with their funding for years and years. So please, don't look at this as an adversarial position from the school committee's point of view. However, that being said, we are in crisis as far as at least the Wildwood School. So please understand that we are going to do everything we can to remedy that situation. And when the vote comes up for senior center, I promise you will have my support and my vote.
I want to say I do mirror that of my colleagues. I speak here as an individual member and not on behalf of the board when I say that I think respectfully that we need to create a capital improvement plan so that we have action, knowing that it's a livable and viable plan where it could switch at any time. I think we need a plan. I think the taxpayers deserve a plan going forth as it pertains to our master facilities plan as to what we target and how we target it and when we target it. Granted, I know there are a lot of variables that go in place, but I think we should have a plan in place as opposed to waiting for, such as the Wildwood, to get to a point of grave concern. Problem solving, just wanted to offer a thought process that it may not be perfect with what the recommended facilities plan had offered, but even if we were to combine the Wildwood and Botwell schools and start working on that, and in the interim, you know, once we move out of the Wildwood, I think it's disrepair that it would be knocked down, but perhaps in the interim we can use the Botwell as a senior center. It has many of the same benefits that this site would have, again, in the interim, because I do think that the seniors do need a bigger space, and to expand and grow their programming. I also think that at that juncture, if that does come to pass, we can move our special ed department, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen the Department of Special Ed within our district. They're working within cubicles smaller than, that is reasonable. It's not a conducive work environment, nor is it a productive work environment. Our students' special needs records are currently housed in a storage container in the parking lot. And each time we have to pull a student record, it takes a significant amount of time to locate the file. That's not efficient operation of our district, nor is an efficient use of our staff to provide for our students. So in saying that, what I was thinking is that even in the interim, we can get a little creative as we move forward in our building situation, where maybe moving the special ed in the interim to Buzzell so that it'd be close to the central office until we have the opportunity to build a central town hall. So I just offer that as a rudimentary thought process of problem solving a situation to move forward. And I think that's what I would like to see is actually action and a plan in place to try to tackle our buildings within our town and especially our schools. And I thank you for your time.
As members of the school committee, it is our responsibility to advocate for the schools, and that is what we're here to do. But as to echo Mr. Bjork, we are also members of this community in this town and want to see that its entire facilities are appropriately addressed, even though, wearing our school committee hats, we are mostly here advocating for the schools. One thing that I want to mention is that part of the urgency is that school buildings are something that potentially we can receive state money for, as we did with the high school when we partnered with the Massachusetts School Building Authority. However, that is a long process when you partner with the state, and for the benefit of receiving their money, there is a long process you have to go through in order to do that. And so the sooner that we get started on that process, then the sooner we can actually upgrade the facilities and give our students the schools that they deserve. And so that is part of the urgency from our perspective.
I don't have a whole lot to add that my colleagues haven't already said. We're here to support. There's a lot of needs in town. We're here to support everything we can, but as a school committee, it's important that we have the right facilities for our children. The Wildwood has seen better days, and I personally wouldn't want my preschooler on the floor in the building. And as a special needs parent, this special needs office is confidentiality issues. There's lots of issues there. We need to figure out a different space for them. So the Wildwood is the biggest concern, and whether or not we move forward with what the facility master plan is calling for, or if we look somewhere different and address the immediate needs, something needs to be done at least with that school. Thank you.
I think the easy answer for me is just to say ditto, because I don't have anything else to add, but I will say that I look forward to working with everybody in the room and everybody in town to there are a lot of needs and they all need to be addressed, and I look forward to the process and working with everybody to achieve those.
I echo what everybody up here has already said.
Dr. Brand, is there anything you'd like to add, or?
Sure, thank you. Again, Glenn Brand, Superintendent. I've been here just a little over a year, as some of you might know, and not surprising and not uncommon from my experiences in other communities is that which Wilmington shares, and that is an awful lot of capital investment needs. The interest here is what I view my role to be in concert with the school committee as the steward of the schools, and knowing very well that there are respective needs throughout this community. Senior Center, along with the schools, along with many others. My primary focus right now is knowing very well the long-term effort that such building and construction and or renovation takes for the schools requires, as has been mentioned earlier, a plan. And I embrace the plan that the facilities study has led to, but that's not to say that that's more pressing than any of the other needs. But understanding very well that any of this work as it relates to construction or renovation of schools is a long-term effort. The state funding that was mentioned a moment ago, generally speaking, the state Massachusetts School Building Authority would
would share with you, as they do very prominently on their website, that if you are a community that's fortunate enough to be invited into that partnership program, you should count on no less than 5, but usually closer to 7 years between the time in which you may cut a ribbon and open a new or renovated facility. So there's a longer term view here, not tomorrow, not next year, 5 to 7 years. And so I think that that's the interest collectively, the school committee and my administration, to ensure that we get on a path towards a plan that can help remedy the situations across our buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Madam Chair, once again, we thank you for being here. It's my understanding that you collectively as a group are going to certainly meet more on this topic.
Correct.
And do some more research and perhaps come up with some more ideas that you'd like to share with the community in the near future. So we look forward to that. We thank you for your perspective, your comments, and we really appreciate you guys being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Chairman Doherty, we'll just give you one other second as we get you settled. We thank you for being here. I also want to remind you that we're obviously having difficulties with the microphone, so if you don't mind speaking up for the audience, that would be great.
Not a problem. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Doherty, and I'm chairman of the Finance Committee for the town. And my colleagues here are
Teresa Manganelli, Vice Chairman.
Michelle Kincaid, Secretary. Marion Galezo, Member.
Bernard Nally, member.
John Dugas, member.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Over the years, the Finance Committee has not taken a direct look at the master plan. However, each year, as we go through the budget, we do capital expenditures to maintain the properties. We also have a 5-year plan that is within the budget, and you can see it in actual proposals that might be made. Personally, I cannot speak on behalf of the committee because we have not had these meetings. Personally, my own feeling is we start with a substation in North Wilmington, then go to a town hall, school administration building, and then a senior center. And do it so that it's not a huge burden on the taxpayers. Because no matter what we do, there's going to be at least some overrides to start funding our improvements. It might not be a popular position, but it's something that we have to look at as the taxes. A decent tax bill each quarter, and we want to make sure that there's not over. But other than that, I'll give it to my members. Teresa?
I think I've already spoken on, well, I know I have. So I am I continue to be in 100% support of the facilities master plan as was voted unanimously by that committee.
I have spent some time going through the master plan. I agree with it. It's going to take time. I think we need to be patient. I know there's always articles in the paper about the large amount of free cash we have, but there are many things that need to be done in this town. And the Capitol building, the Capitol is probably number 1 on our list of things to put the money towards and improving our buildings. But we also have to understand that we can't override taxes for every project on here right away. We have to stagger it, and then as the debt is paid off for a portion of the buildings that are working, then we work on the next one. But this plan wasn't created to be done in 5 years. It just isn't. And I also agree with the superintendent in the fact that the MSBA is a great organization, but it takes time, and you have to do all the studies and the feasibility studies and whatnot before you can even get into that process. So it is probably about a 7-year process. Overall, I think it's a great plan, and I support it.
I do agree with the master facilities plan, but I would also like to ask George, what is your priorities as far as the buildings go? What is Mr. Hooper's priorities as far as the lifespan of the buildings that are listed on the facilities master plan?
George, if you don't mind stepping to that microphone so the TV folks at home can hear, thank you.
This one right here?
If you'd like, thank you.
Can everybody hear me? All right. As you may or may not know, I'm also your superintendent of buildings. My thing on here, I'm a taxpayer also, I live in this community. So I don't want to throw good money after bad, all right? So when it takes some of these buildings, you have to know when to say when on some of these. The Wildwood School, I agree with the superintendent. We've been maintaining this right along. We're keeping it going. But after a while, you have to know when to either fish or cut bait. It really has some expenditures that are coming down the road. It's unfair, we'll say, to have some of the teachers in our youngest population, our students that are most important, in this aging facility. Again, the MSBA, the Mass School Building Authority, I'm familiar with it. When you put in an SOI, which is a statement of interest, they bring it in, and you're invited in. They take a look at you, and that doesn't mean that you're gonna get it. So that could take 5 to 7 years. Do we wanna have those constraints? I mean, I'm not always in favor of just because there's money available, we'll wait those 7 years. If you don't get it, then you have to reapply. So that could take even longer. So we need to kind of move forward. And one of the requirements for the MSBA is that you appropriate 100% of those funds. So when they're looking at you and you put in your statement of interest, you have to show that you've appropriated this at town meeting, that everybody's on board, and then they'll come back to you and tell you what your reimbursement rate is. I know they're not as good as they used to be. For example, when we did the high school. Everybody's trying to take advantage of that and move along right now. But the Wildwood School, I agree, that is kind of a priority. The senior center, a priority. You guys are busting at the seams. I go there, I work with every one of the department heads. Terry Marciello is doing a fantastic job. The parking over there, you guys are spreading out to different facilities. You're going to the 4th of July building for programs. You're going to the Art Center. You're going to the library. So I get it. We're just trying to have this plan in place. That's what it is, a plan. That's why we're here now, because nobody's really looked at this. We have to, as a community, as a whole, that's what I was trying to get across, that we'll work together on this, prioritize which ones need to come first. Can one wait a little longer than the other? Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to take a look at it. I work very closely with the town manager, the finance committee, the board of selectmen. When we sit down and we do our budgets on capital improvements, we try to prioritize. As a taxpayer, I try to be responsible for how I spend my money, your money, our money. That's, I don't want to, again, throw good money after bad. So we have to look at this. I've been fortunate, I've had your support when we've done the window projects at a lot of our schools. We've updated lighting, put in new LEDs, we've done heating systems. We're in pretty good shape on a lot of our schools, but some of our older facilities, this is one of them, that the finishes are aging. It's time to move along. Again, single pane windows. I know as far as the town hall goes, not a lot of people care about the comfort of the people that are in here. This is where you pay your taxes. But our school children, our seniors, we have a priority here. So that's where we need to look at it. If you want me to say which one comes first, I think we have to take a look at it. I don't think that the Wildwood School can wait 7 to 14 years. I think we really have to come up with a plan. When we go through this facility master plan, it does outline being able to build a new senior center around this building. Well, it's still operating. So it is a plan. So I think we need to take a look at it as a whole and kind of, I mean, if you support it, let's get out there and support it. I'll work with the town manager and the finance committee, and we'll start budgeting for a lot of this. It's coming right down the road. So initially, we were looking at 2022, I believe, Jeff, correct? For
Yes.
a new school admin, town hall, and senior center. So, which isn't, it sounds like it's a little bit of ways, but it's really not. And then the schools were gonna be 2025. So, we have to get ourselves in a line for that. And that's where the support for this has to come into place. I hope that answers some of your questions and maybe throws a little bit more out there.
Thank you, George.
Anyone has any questions, or?
I have nothing specific to comment on. We haven't had any meetings about the subject. But we all are townspeople. We all are taxpayers. The job of the finance committee is to watch what we spend. And everybody that complains about their tax bill, I did too. We just got them. But you have to pay the bill. Everything is going to cost money. Everything, no matter what you do. So you got to keep that in mind. That over the years, and what we're talking about is a long-term situation here for the entire town. Some people will get what they want right away. Some people are going to have to wait. And we'll all try to meet together in the middle and plan what we're going to do and then live with it and then pay for it. So that's always in the background. Thank you.
And I don't have a ton to add here. I'm brand new to this committee and fairly new to town, so I'm not going to lie and say I've read the entire 125 pages yet. But I do have the full confidence in both the Facilities Master Plan Committee and the school committee that just came up here. But you know, as a finance committee, our job is to look at what we want the future of Wilmington to be and find out the most fiscally responsible way to get there. And as a result of that, I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing this conversation with all of these stakeholders. So you guys have our full attention.
Well, thank you, Chairman Doherty.
Thank you.
And to your committee. We really appreciate, obviously, a very important perspective that I know is on the foremost of our minds as well. Every decision we make, we're thinking about how expensive it is to live out there, and so we want to keep that in mind, so thank you for reminding of that, and thank you for the work that you do, and appreciate you guys being here.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along, I'd like to do two more things. I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to make comment on the presentations we heard, and then if there are no objections, I'd like to take public comment out of order and perhaps move that to the next item on the agenda. Okay? Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's all right if I sit here. I'm known to have a big mouth every now and then, so if you don't mind. So, first of all, the Permanent Building Committee, there's no question that they work hard, and it's no small task. And I think if we look in our room here tonight, we're gonna have 50 different views of what's the priority, what's first, second, third, all the way down to the 50th. And I know we're talking about a 20 to 30 year span, but we're looking at spending hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what it really looks to it. You know, I've been serving this community going on 33 years. I've been a member of the Board of Selectmen for 30 years, and I've seen it all. I supported the middle school. In order to support something, it was the Board of Selectmen and the school committee finally working together to do that. I supported, and along with seniors and everybody in this room, supported the middle school. The public safety building, a lot of folks here, seniors as well as ourselves, we worked together, we were able to put a public safety building. And I'll admit, I was the only person back in 2005 that was opposed to the construction, maybe I'll hear some boos, but I don't think so, to the construction of a new library. And I'm not Nostradamus, I said back then, I guarantee you in 10 years, when we build this library, in 10 years from now, we're gonna need a new school. And that happened, you know. So I'm looking at the big picture here, and every year we seem to raise taxes by the 2.5% as the guidelines from the Commonwealth. But we always seem to bank about $4 million a year. For the past 4 to 5 years, we've been putting about $4 million in free cash. So lately, that's been going pretty good for the community. And I got an idea, I'm gonna throw it out there, and it may go well, but it may not go well. But the idea is, we all work hard. And basically, taxes are going up every year, and there's the same folks that say the same thing. I'm paying a lot of taxes, you're really trying to force me out of here in the town. But we do tax the full max. But there is $4 million in 2 different accounts. Right now, we have the town manager, we have $18 million in free cash and $14 million in the stabilization account. And basically, those are 2 bank accounts with $32 mil. But we always seem to be, past 4 or 5 years, putting an extra $4 million that we're getting out of tax revenue, and that's how we're banking the free cash. Sometimes you need to do a jump start, and I get it. The MSBA grants, usually if we work out with the Commonwealth, they pay about 45 cents of every dollar, and you're foolish not to take it. But sometimes what I look at is, sometimes you need to do a little jump start. And it sounds like it's not too far, 2022, 2023, but I'm sure that we're gonna run into a roadblock down there as well. So I believe there are 3 priorities here in the town of Wilmington. Like I said, I've lived in this community for 60 years, I've seen it all. The number 1 priority that I would support that we need is a substation in North Wilmington. That's priority number 1. Priority number 2 would absolutely be a senior center. And I differ with my colleagues and maybe with the manager. I think priority 3, we need to do something with the schools. And what do I talk about, a jump start? I really think it's time that we went into the free cash. We need to, the town manager came up with a proposal, and I know it's premature right now at the moment, and it's at its infancy, about $8 million to do a fire substation. Well, I think what we should do is fair across the board. If we did $8 million for a fire substation, we should look at it, $8 million for a senior center, and we should take that $8 million and give it to the schools. Now, if we only spend $7 million, or $7 million on a substation, $7 million on a senior center, that extra 2 should go to the schools. And what do I mean by a jump start? I think that's something we should start acting now. And I know we'll have some disagreement. Take the $24 million out of free cash over the period of time. And 3 years from now, folks, we're probably gonna put another $12 million into it. So if we took $24 million out of free cash, 3 years from now, we're gonna be putting, another $12 million into it, we'll be back at $20 million. I think it's time we dipped into the free cash. That's how I see it. I know, I spoke a few minutes, but, like I said, a lot of folks out there, a lot of seniors supported all these projects. And I think those are the priorities. And I think we need to jumpstart. We should spend some of our own money up front, give $8 million or $9 million to the schools, and let them work with it, that they could try to, there's issues at different schools and what they could work with. And then we look at other projects down the road. That's how I see it. We got all this money in free cash. I think it's about time we dipped into it. That's how I see it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. Mr. Kyra?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first begin by thanking the committee for putting together this facilities master plan. I also want to recognize George and the Public Buildings Department and our town manager for always having the foresight to maintaining the facilities that we have. And let's face it, we live in our own homes, and we maintain those homes as well. And so that's how we have to maintain our buildings. We're not, after 30 or 40 years of living in a house, we're not knocking it down and building a new one the way you might figure is going to happen with the buildings we have here today. So it's important that we continue to maintain the buildings that we have. The way I look at it is what's going to last for the next 5 years. And I don't see the Roman House lasting for 5 years, and I don't see the Wildwood School lasting for 5 years. So I'm trying to look down the road a bit. I see many of the other buildings being so well maintained that they're going to survive. So I don't want to drill down to what should be done. Everybody, as other people have alluded to, you put 50 people in a room, you have 50 ideas. It's just what process do we take? What comes forward? What comes first? We all know it's gonna take time. We all know it's gonna take money. And as Mr. Bjork said, we should all be working together. It's not an us versus them. We all understand that a new senior center would be ideal to have, or a repurposed building for a senior center would be an ideal substitution as well. I too think that a substation in North Wilmington is a priority. I think it's important to have it. But I think we need to look at what starts first to sort of get that domino effect, so that we can get things moving. I certainly do feel that the school committee and the school department, and I'm sure they are starting their plans to file applications for the MSBA. I hope that they would look into doing that shortly. I know deadlines are coming up for that. But just to throw this out, since everybody's throwing out some ideas, I really think that we should look at starting with a town hall and school administration building. And I think we should look at putting it over at the St. Dorothy's facility. And with that said, and the reason why I say this is because it frees up this building here. And it frees up this building so that the children over the Wildwood could come over here for the time period that we need to work on the schools, either building a new Wildwood or going with the plan of the 4 schools and renovating them. It gives time for the application to go through the process, since it might take 5 to 7 years. And after that process is done, then this becomes open for a senior center. Now, I know it's time. It takes a lot of time, and it may not be what you want to hear, but a new senior center is not going to happen tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. It will happen, though, and you just have to find the appropriate approach to take. So I look forward to the process continuing, discussions to take place, and I think we should all just continue to work together to see how this plays out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kyra. Mr. Eden.
Thank you, Mr. Bendel. I hope to speak loud enough so the folks in back can hear me, but I do want to thank the very hard work that the Facilities Master Plan Committee put in. There was a work that was done that was designed to help educate everybody in town that has an interest as to the varying needs that our facilities have. I trust that the goal of tonight is step one. Let's educate everybody in town as to what those needs are. Let's start a discussion about the Facilities Master Plan, so that if you're not going to the senior center, or you're not going to the schools regularly, or you're not coming to town hall regularly, you at least have an ability to hear as to what the limitations and the needs of those different facilities are. I don't view that tonight is the end of step one, which is educating everybody. I hope that the discussion will continue so that we can continue to hear from the different departments, the different folks that work in our buildings, and also the folks that are going to these buildings, the library, the senior center, and the like, to hear more about what's next. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not completely rebuilding Wilmington, and it certainly isn't going to take a day. The Facilities Master Plan covers between 2019 and 2034, but as has been stated here tonight, this might not all happen, or might not all fit neatly in that period. So Mr. Nally, former Chief Nally, spoke to it as well. This is going to cost overall a significant amount of money, and the goal needs to be to sequence it in a way that the taxpayers are not seeing a shock to their system every quarter when their taxes are going up. We're not trying to do everything overnight. We're just trying to do it in a way that makes sense given our current, the state of our facilities, and address the various needs. I think Mr. Bjork made a very salient point earlier, where he said that this is not a point where we are competing. We are just trying to have a conversation so folks know where everything is, and we can make a decision later on down the line. So I do appreciate those comments. I agree with some of my colleagues on a substation as well. I think it might have been all of my colleagues, but I've lost track at this point. But I do think a fire substation should be the top priority in town. The facilities master plan itself really discusses the need for a fire substation in the abstract, and it says that at some point the town is going to reach a critical point where a substation is needed, and it doesn't define what that critical point is, and it isn't included in the financing schedule that is a part of it. I know that the town manager and our finance director / town accountant put a lot of work into coming up with an estimate as to how much that might cost, a substation, and that is right now without a known location as to where it would be. So I know that our town administration is still working hard, because I think the need for that, public safety, I think one of the roles of government, one of the primary roles of government is to keep the folks that we represent safe, and I think a substation is a decision that could help save lives. I think going along with what I've said about this is not the end of the step one, let's hear and let's educate everyone so we can make a decision. I do hope that not only are we going to hear from residents tonight, and I'm glad that residents have an ability to not only ask questions, but have their opinions be heard and have us listen to it, but also that the Elderly Services Commission is a part of an upcoming meeting as well. I want to hear about the different constraints that have been mentioned earlier tonight about the limitations of the senior center. What programs are limited because of the limitations of that facility? What accommodations are made, staggering start times of programs because of the parking issues that Mr. Hooper had referenced. Having some programs done at the 4th of July building because the Bazell Center does not have the capacity to meet the program attendance. And also what programs they would like to have but are not able to because of the current facility. So I look forward to continuing that conversation. Because we had the school committee here tonight, I did want to at least, I know that at least our last two permanent superintendents had expressed a desire to, or I guess a reservation about the number of transitions that our elementary school children have. They're going to pre-K and kindergarten in one school, and first, second, and third at another school, and then fourth and fifth at another school. And I'm not the expert in child development. I'm just an amateur parent at this point. But I do recognize that the current facilities master plan as to schools doesn't completely eliminate the problem of having transition to transition to transition before middle school, but it does at least cut out one of those transitions. What I would hope would be at least an option that was explored, and I would ask you, Mr. Hooper, right now the facilities master plan contemplates an addition at the Woburn Street School, the Shawshene School, the West Intermediate, and the North Intermediate schools. That's 4 additions at each of those schools, with the goal of phasing out the Beltwell School and the Wildwood as a school. I know that there was there's some rough estimates as to what those additions on each of those 4 schools would be. But I was wondering if that was kind of the maximum that would be permitted at those sites, or if we could perhaps do an addition at the North Intermediate and the Shawshene, or another combination, so that we could possibly do additions at 2 schools as opposed to 4, which might, it could save money, I don't know, but it might be something that's worth pursuing to kind of help our situation.
If you don't mind, I'll just stand here so everyone can hear me. Jonathan, thank you on that. The drawings that are in there for each one of the schools is just conceptual to give you an idea of what it would look like. It's not the exact location. It's not anything that was really drawn to scale. It was just to give you an idea what it would look like if you were going to have a grade be absorbed into the North Intermediate School. As far as your question as if we could increase the size of that, I think the constraints would also be determined by the utilities that are provided in the area. North Intermediate School is on sewerage, so you wouldn't have to worry about a septic problem, where like the Woburn Street School is on a septic tank. So there are some constraints there. North Intermediate has gas, where the Woburn Street is on oil. But to answer your questions, I think it would have to, we'd have to have a firm come in architectural designs with engineers to see what we could actually put on those sites, what they would handle. I know the West Intermediate lot is not as big as the Shawshene, and as far as the North Intermediate goes, you'd have to take away some parking at the Shawshene. I don't know if it would impact any of the playing fields out back, but depends on what you were looking to add into those. So we'd have to have a feasibility study and a design put into place.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hooper.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. So I just want to address one other issue, because I know that free cash in our capital stabilization account was mentioned. You can sit down, Mr. Hooper. You can stand if you want, but I'm done with you. I want to be wary of just thinking that we should be spending down our free cash in our capital stabilization accounts. The facilities master plan, the kind of the big ticket items, senior center, town hall, school administration building, about $750,000 at Hounded Tavern, almost $98 million in our schools, about a little over $9 million. I'm sorry, 7.2 on the DPW, $2 million in public safety building, $644,000 for public buildings offices, $7.8 million at a substation, and we're estimating a fire substation, a library of $7.8 million, and we're estimating a fire and police substation, however that gets done, at about $8 million. I know that S&P, Standard & Poor's, recommends that we retain about 15% of our operating expenses as free cash. That's free cash and capital stabilization. I don't want to kind of blow it all on the first couple projects, because we have several projects coming up, and I want to be wary of just spending too much. I'd be interested to hear, Mr. Doherty or any members of the Finance Committee, what some of your opinions might be in approaches, kind of big picture view from 30,000 feet on spending and borrowing, and how we should be approaching that.
I would, for the substation, I would take some free cash, probably $2 million, see if we can get reimbursement or a donation from Princeton Properties if they do what you do. Take the rest and bond it over 10 years, but do repay back of the bonding within the town budget itself, so there's no override. That way there would be no effect on the individual taxes for that period of time. And then as time goes on and the school, high school gets paid down, you can then start looking at a town hall school administration vote, which would probably have to be bonded at that point in time. But again, take some free cash, not much, or some from the capital stabilization fund, so that the bond is not as high as it could be. And do the same thing for senior center.
Okay.
And then go from there.
And just to mention kind of a point that I had forgotten, I'm sorry, I apologize for interrupting, so I'll certainly cede to you. But just one of the benefits of kind of following the guidance of Standard & Poor's of retaining a healthy free cash balance is when we do go to borrow, it keeps our interest rates lower, so
The higher bond rating, the lower rate.
correct.
So that's why we normally take a lot out of free cash. Sorry before you. I would disagree with you on that one.
I kind of disagree with you there of the debt exclusion, because we're gonna be paying more in debt. And once again, we've been turning around $4 million a year, and I think you wouldn't dispute that. And once again, if we took that $24 million and just did it right now, senior center, substation, and something with the schools in 3 years, we'll be back to about $20 million in 3 years.
That's based on today's very good economy.
Yeah, it seems to be going pretty good.
It's based on today's economy, that we get this free cash. That may change in the future.
Yeah.
You know, and I just want to be rather cautious than
I hear you.
spend everything.
I respect that opinion.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Mrs. O'Mahony.
I'm gonna stand, just so you can hear me, even though I'm loud. Dawn, Troy, move the cameras up. No one on WCTV wants to see my belly. I want to first reiterate the thank you to the Facilities Master Plan Committee. This document, it's available on the website, and I would suggest looking at all of it, including the appendices. It's over 300 pages, but it's a comprehensive evaluation of every public building. So I think instead of having to speculate as to kind of how these buildings look and what the needs are, we have it in writing. So I want to say that first, because I'm the first one to be guilty of relying sometimes on social media or summaries that someone else has created. And in this case, I think it's imperative that we all read the information that has been compiled, because I think it helps show us really where the needs are, where the requirements are for us to help prioritize this. With that being said, I respectfully have some suggestions as to the information that's in it. First, I want to say I appreciate everyone tonight who has said so far that we need to keep this an "and" conversation. I've said this to you guys before when you've heard me speak about this. This is a very easy situation for us to become divided. And my hope is we hear what each other needs and we figure out a way to collaboratively address those needs in a thoughtful, respectful way. There should never be seniors versus students. There should never be, we have to pick one thing at the expense of something else so great that you feel like you've completely lost. And I want to make that heard, because I feel like we're entering a time. This conversation starts tonight. It's not going to end tonight. We need everyone at town meeting, not just parents of young children. We need seniors. We need everyone there, because this conversation is important and every voice is important to be heard. So I want that to be heard tonight. I want you guys to see my face saying that, right? So that being said, where I kind of have some questions and concerns and things that I would like to see explored, I appreciate Selectman Eaton asking the question to Mr. Hooper about consolidating the schools a little bit more than what is suggested here. Wildwood School can't wait. That everybody agrees with that. My concern is right now we're hitching kind of the senior center wagon on a $19 million new town hall. I'm not comfortable with that plan. I think I would rather hitch the wagon on expanding the schools, addressing the schools' needs, and then utilizing the schools interimly for a new senior center and a new administrative building. So I'm going to say this as a hypothetical, because I am not the superintendent of the buildings. I don't know which buildings makes the most sense. So when I'm saying these buildings, it's not because it's specific to that building, it's just the concept of it. So my idea would be that we consolidate K through 5 on each side of town into one existing building. So let's say that the north makes the most sense to expand on the north side of town, and that the west makes, just for hypotheticals, I'm not saying this is the exact buildings, K through 5. Boutwell becomes the early childhood center for preschool, so that Wildwood gets evacuated for the time being. If we can get the funding for the expansion right now, and I'm referring to page 25 and page 109 of the actual master plan for those of you at home who are looking at it right now, for those of you who have it. Right now, everything that's being suggested costs $143.5 million for the town. $98 million of that is the renovation of the 4 school buildings, right? So that's where I'm coming from with the money part of it. If we can cut that in half by only renovating 2 buildings and expanding them to the extent that it will cover K through 5 for at least the next 5 or 10 years of our needs, then we've succeeded on that front. Get the preschool to the Boutwell. We've now freed up 2 schools. So again, using my hypothetical, we freed up the Woburn Street School and we freed up the Shawshene Elementary School, right? Now again, I'm not speaking for the seniors and what your ideal senior center would be. But I have to guess, after looking at the Buzzell Senior Center currently, that if you were asked to go to a modified Shawshene Elementary School, where you'd have ample classrooms for all your classes, where you'd have a cafeteria with a fully functional kitchen, and you'd have a gymnasium, that you could do everything all in one facility, it might not be the ideal. It might not be the brand new shiny senior center that we all hope for. But something tells me that might be something you'd be okay with for at least the next 5 or 10 years while we're figuring out a better plan. Am I wrong? Right? The town hall, I appreciate the fact that we don't want to be doing our Board of Selectmen meetings where there's wood paneling, but I don't think we need a $19 million building for the town hall right now when there's so many other needs. And that the $19 million I'm getting from the estimate on page 25 and 109. I'm not making that number up. I'm not exaggerating a number. I'm using the data that's been presented to us. So in my mind, again, it's not maybe the ideal location to have it at the Woburn Street or wherever it would be, but something tells me if we had to move the administrative offices temporarily for however long it took to get a new town hall plan in place that makes sense fiscally for us, that's an interim plan that makes sense to me. And that's where I think we need to be looking at. You know, we're looking at bigger, better all the time, tear downs all the time. We can't be a tear down community from beginning to end. And the problem is, while we're waiting to be able to do something brand new, we're doing not much at all. And we need to start doing something before we can get to everything, right? So I agree that the substation should be a priority, and it's not even built into the $143 million bottom line, because in the master plan it says it's a need for the future use, but because it's not an existing building, there's no way to really assess it, right? At the last Board of Selectmen's meeting, we were presented with a possible opportunity for that substation that might not be the $8 million that we anticipated, because maybe there's a way that we can work with Reading Municipal to have that make sense. We need to explore all the options, right? And I have to acknowledge, Representative Robertson's here tonight, Senator Tarr's here tonight. So we've said it takes 5 to 7 years to get the funding through the state. So maybe we're applying that for the Boutwell so that we can upgrade the Early Childhood Center down the road. But we shouldn't just be looking at the MSBA funding. We should be exploring all state and federal funding available to us for all municipal buildings that we're talking about. And that's where I'd like to get input from our delegation, from our legislation, to tell us what other options are even available to us and how fast can we get them implemented. Because this needs to be a conversation that involves everyone, and like we did tonight, gets everybody to the table. So you've heard my colleague say, you know, 50 people, 50 plans. You've now heard 4 people with four varying plans. But I think it's fair to say we all know where the priorities are. We need to get the schools, we need to get Wildwood in place, but we need to do it in a thoughtful way that's not a short-term Band-Aid, but has a longer-term plan to it. We need to get a substation. We need to get the senior center. I think everything else falls under that list. So the $19 million town hall, although it sounds awesome, I think that's something that we can wait maybe until 2025, 2030 to get to. The library, it's a shame that we couldn't deal with it when we had some funding available, but maybe we look at exploring alternatives to that so it's not a $7 million project. Maybe we can do expansions over time. And that's where I rely on the great people we have on these different boards, but we need to start. I think the bottom line is tonight starts the conversation that we need to have moving forward, continuing, so that at the very next town meeting next year, even if I'm sitting with you in the audience instead of up here on the Board of Selectmen, we need to make sure that we're moving this ball down the field, right? All right, so that's it.
Just wanted to make a couple of comments. I know the night is running late. With respect to free cash, I equate these kind of projects that we are talking about on a much larger scale than your house. If you've got a roof to replace, windows to replace, maybe a septic system to replace, as a homeowner, you've got some choices. You can either borrow to take care of some of that, or you can use all of the money that you have in your savings account. My concern about using all the money that we have in our savings account for some of these projects is that we have been riding a pretty good wave here of economic prosperity in the last several years. Certainly, varying people have benefited more than others, but generally speaking, the economy has gone pretty well. If anybody's been around for as long as I have, you know that the economy ebbs and flows, and we will have a downturn. It's just a question of when. And when the economy starts to go south, and the revenue that we've been able to generate some of this free cash, motor vehicle excise, building permits and so on, starts to taper off, that's when, as in the past, we have used some of that free cash to keep our operations, our core operations, the educational system, public buildings, public works, police and fire. We've tapped into that savings account to keep those services running so we don't have to have major layoffs like other communities have. And so that's why I've continued to preach the idea that we can't use all of our free cash, as much as it may be desirable, to spend on buildings. We have to maintain an amount of money in the bank, so to speak. So that was just one point. I think this conversation is a good start. I think we need to continue it. One of the things that I face, and George Hooper, who's talked about this a bit, face when we're looking at our 5-year capital plan, which we do have. It's a 5-year plan that looks at the various major items, whether it's purchasing vehicles, doing work to buildings. One of the challenges that we have right now is what major expenses to incur on some of these buildings. Last year, George recommended that we replace the windows on the Woburn Street School and the West Intermediate School. It was about $1.5 million for each of those projects. Ultimately, I made the decision to defer. One of the challenges, obviously, is we don't want to be spending significant dollars on buildings that may have a shorter lifespan. We got a bit of criticism even spending the $25,000 or $28,000 that we spent on the Roman House roof. The fact of the matter was that in that particular case, we literally had a leaky roof and we had people that were working in that building, so it was necessary. But that's just one of the challenges that we're up against, is that absent a particular game plan, it becomes very, very challenging when you're asked, and I'm guessing those window projects that George is going to come forward with this year are probably something in the tune of $2 million each. So, you know, those are decisions we have to make, but again, as he pointed out, you don't want to be spending good money after bad. You don't want to be spending a lot of money on a building that maybe only is going to be around for 5 or 10 years. And then the final point I would just make with respect to the good folks in the school department, we've certainly been working with the superintendent and the business manager, and we'll continue to do that. I think one of the things that's going to be important as this discussion goes forward is to understand from the school department, the school committee, what is the school department's vision for schools? Is it to reduce and consolidate schools? Before, I was at a session not too long ago in Situate where they were showcasing a middle school that they had constructed through MSBA, and one of the things that struck me was that they commented on, in that particular case, constructing a building that fit the educational needs versus the other way around, where the educational needs have to be kind of morphed into a particular building. So I think it's important for the school department to really take a hard look at, from an educational perspective, what is the best type of facilities that are suitable to the educational programs that they have in mind for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. And so I would agree with a lot of the comments that have been said already. I think we can see a few major projects that are rising to the top here, if you will, whether it's a substation, senior center, Wildwood School. I would agree that these are all projects we need to explore in the immediate so that we can present the public with all the facts that they'll need to make an informed decision come that future town meeting, whenever it is. And so I look forward to continuing this conversation in a very public process like we are here tonight. I appreciate the committees coming tonight and also volunteering to stay here beyond your time. I really appreciate that. You can see how important it is to these folks that they've volunteered to stay even after their presentation. And so I know we would all love to have a shovel in the ground tomorrow on a particular project, but we realize that that's not a reality for us, and that we again have to continue to measure twice, cut once, so that we can be very fiscally responsible in whatever we decide to do collectively as a group. And I look forward to working with all of you as we move forward. If there aren't any objections from my colleagues, I'd like to take public comment out of order in tonight's agenda so that we could have folks be heard. And I want to add that if you are unable to come to the microphone, we can accommodate you. I'll be happy to bring the microphone to you. But if someone has a comment or a question, please, Mrs. Reed, I know you're chomping at the bit. Come on up.
Conversation going, and thank you for listening, and all you people, we all can go home now.
I'll take that as a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Anybody else? And if you don't mind, just introducing yourself and your address for the record. Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind approaching the microphone if you can. Thank you.
In town for over 50 years. Could you answer me a question?
Move it, it's not working.
So I'll do the best I can to relay the question, okay? If you don't mind,
Okay.
thank you.
My question is, I was at a planning board meeting at the senior center about 3 years ago. Very excellent presentation, we came up with plans. Senior housing was on that plan. I haven't heard it mentioned tonight at all. Everybody talks about how many years it's gonna take for all the committees to come up with their ideas. How long is feasible for the senior housing to come up?
So for anybody here, Mrs. Dion, correct, is asked about senior housing. And I'll yield to Mr. Hooper. I think it was mentioned that it was taken up in the facilities master plan. And forgive me, I don't remember the page, but it's towards the end. Do you want to speak to that, Mr. Hooper? That senior housing was explored in this report?
Correct, it is explored in the report. It was kind of off on the side as the new substation. So I don't believe it was identified in a timeline, but it is something that can be addressed as we move forward. So.
Yeah.
Just to point, a couple of points on that. So there were a couple of discussion points about the prospect for senior housing, either being at the St. Dorothy's, property next to the St. Dorothy's, or possibly here at the town hall. You know, one of the concepts that was discussed during those meetings was the prospect, if a senior center, for example, was to be located at the town hall and housing was to be located next to St. Dorothy's, that proximity, at least for some, would have some benefits, but I don't know that there was a particular consensus around that.
Mrs.
There
Dion?
seemed to be a lot of comment around town when the plan was made known that they were in favor of it. Number one, St. Dorothy's has access to the bus, which could take seniors to Lowell if they wanted to, down to Market Basket, whatever. But I've been in town over 50 years, and I was told over 50 years ago that we desperately needed more senior housing. We haven't got it yet, and it's been 50 years. How many more years? I hope you guys are still around when we get it.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Please.
Robin Theodos. First of all, this is Wilmington. One town. We all live here. I hope we all can get along. We all have our wants and our needs, and we're all going to pitch for what we want. But let's get along while we do it. I'm pitching for senior center, senior housing. Senior center, shame on Wilmington. Terry Masiello is our director of elderly. Her office is approximately 10 by 10, and she has to share it with another woman. I happen to be a commissioner. I can't even go into my boss's office and have a private conversation. We have to look around until we find an empty room that's not being utilized. That's a disgrace. There is a need for senior center. I don't care where it is. We really, really need it. And by the way, I'd like to see the new town hall down on the Swain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi,
Good evening.
Deborah Russo, senior. I liked what you said, Ms. O'Mahony, about not tying the senior center to a new town hall. It's like, if this, then this. And I heard a lot about 5 to 7 years and lots of time and lots of studies. But if you look at your audience, who are mostly in their 70s and 80s, in 5 to 7 years, some of these people won't even be here. Now, this is the thing. A lot of people here, born and raised in Wilmington, others came when they were very young. First job, maybe 15, 16. Now they're in their 70s and 80s. They probably worked until not far from then. And they supported this town. They carried this town. They paid for so many things. And now it's their time. It's our time. I don't care where you build it. Build it now. Build it now. All you talk about people whose homes, you know, oh, if you got a leaky roof, you got to think about where to get the money, or your house is cold, you got to think about where. Well, when people's roofs are leaking and their houses are cold, you know what they do? They go to the senior center because it's warm there and there's other people there. That's what they do. So give them a space. Give them a bigger space. Give them a decent space. And one more thing. You talk about the master plan being on the website. Look at your audience. A lot of these people don't have computers. Or if they have computers or their, you know, sons or daughters or grandsons, they don't know how to use them. So when are you going to give us a hard copy of the master plan? When is that going to be available?
It's available on request.
Okay, we request it.
We'll give it to anybody who asks, right? Yeah. Just to address that, the final question there, certainly if anybody would like to have access to a printed copy, the town manager's office would be happy to accommodate that. If you want to give them a call, Mr. Hull and his office would be happy to do that.
Maybe you should put a few down at the library.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come forward for public comment? It's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Kevin McDonald, I just have a few suggestions and some comments. But before I make those, I'd like to just share a story with you. I had a conversation with our town clerk a few years ago about the town expenses and the town budget and the high taxes. And the conversation dealt with a few different topics, but what the story that I'd like to share with you had to do with employee health benefits. And the employee was Sharon George. She was the town clerk then. And we were talking about the town employee health benefits, stop-loss insurance, and that sort of thing. She mentioned to me that her husband worked for the city of Gloucester.
Mr. McDonald, I'm going to interrupt you. We're talking about the facilities master plan
This,
presentation.
believe it or not, is related to that because when you take a look at all the expenses in town, the taxation, I think it's important. This will kind of bring it into perspective. Her husband worked for the city of Gloucester, and they provided health insurance. However, the town of Wilmington, she told me, had better health benefits. So a guy that worked for another municipality was on our health insurance instead of Gloucester's health insurance because Wilmington's was better. And so this is an example of something that I don't think seems right. And I'm just wondering, how many more stories like this do we have? And are we being cheated? Are we being a little bit treated unfairly? And now what I'd like to do is make a few suggestions and explore some of these ideas. We heard about substation, but I've yet to hear about anybody making the suggestion and the observation that there are other towns that also have parts of their town having remote locations or locations that are a significant distance from their central fire station, such as Andover, such as North Reading. Tewksbury might be a town we might want to take a look at because they do have a substation over on South Street, which is relatively close to the Wilmington line in North Wilmington. And what I'd like to suggest is to reach out to these other communities such as Andover and North Andover, and maybe even Tewksbury, instead of hiring 8 new firemen, absorbing all the health benefits, all the pensions, all the salaries, and that sort of thing, the overtime. Maybe we can pay Tewksbury some money to cover parts of Wilmington, or maybe we can put some men at the Tewksbury facility. In addition to that, there's been a piece of land that was identified that the town didn't even know that it owned.
Mr. McDonald,
And so if
Mr. McDonald,
Andover,
I'm going to give you another minute. There's some other folks who would like to be heard.
Okay, I'm all done, thank you.
Well, thank you. Anybody else like to be heard? Sir?
Good evening, Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road, Wilmington. Just Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road, Wilmington. Just wanted to mention in your master plan, in this facility's master plan, in respect to senior housing, the words here says, the planning process does not contemplate the town developing, owning, or operating senior living facilities as a public service. So those are the words that are in the plan as far as senior housing. And I do think that Deming Way, we have 77 units and probably a 2-3 year wait to get in. I think that's a pressing problem for the town as well as a senior center itself. The other question that I have is, you talk about, you have these different committees going on. One committee is for a skating rink. Where does that fit in here?
I can tell you that the town is looking at all options.
Okay. Now, one other comment, sir, is that, are you going to have a general public comment session?
We're here all night, Frank. If you'd like to stick around, you're more than welcome.
I have a different topic that has nothing to do with this. So I didn't know if you're going to have that in public, if I could have public comments.
Reserve some time at the end if you'd like.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Please.
if I could just note to address what Mr. West, he quoted part of the, sorry. Mr. West quoted part of the senior housing that was addressed, and I just wanted, again, refer people, I will get copies made and delivered to the senior center for you guys, and I apologize that I've been referring to the website. On page 108, just note page 108, they do talk about senior housing. They do reference the St. Dorothy site as a possibility. So I want to just make it clear that there is information on here saying different ways that senior housing can be implemented. It's not factored into the cost because there's a lot of variables that it addresses in ways that it can be funded. So I didn't want you to think it was ignored, and I just wanted to make that clear that it is in here.
Sir.
My name is Jack Kavanaugh. I live in Adams Street in Wilmington. I was looking at the facility plan, and there are 3 references to senior housing. In the plan on page 2, under facility needs and improvements, it refers to the need of the fire station and continues and says the planning for future senior housing in Wilmington as it may relate to town-owned land. They're referring to St. Dorothy's. Page 5, under senior housing, as part of the town meeting authorization study, the town staff was directed to consider the potential use of town-owned sites for senior housing. That would fulfill an unmet need, finally. This is in the plan. And on page 17, under senior housing, gets more specific. The St. Dorothy site is a reasonable candidate for the location of senior housing facility. This site does not appear to be a disadvantaged location for any of the other facilities. By the way, my knee is killing me. This site is adequate for the moderate seal for senior housing. Those 3 references infer that senior housing is important. It's being overlooked. It is in the facility plan. We should not overlook that. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anybody else like to be heard? Okay. Well, again, I want to reiterate, before we move on with the rest of the meeting, that this will be the very beginning of a very public discussion that will continue into the very near future. I want to thank the committees for being here, volunteering your time. Again, as was mentioned, we will make this document not only available online, but at most of the public facilities, town hall, the senior center, the library, and certainly if you would like a copy yourself, feel free to call town hall. We'd be happy to accommodate you with one. I hope people will take the time to digest this report. It's very informative, it's well thought out, and it gives us a great resource to look at as we move forward, working together to figure out what will be the next steps for Wilmington. So I recognize it's getting late. I thank you all. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But I'll call for a short recess, if it's okay, / bathroom break, before we continue. And then it's getting late. We're going to call the meeting back to order. Are we all set on TV? Okay, welcome back, folks. We want to continue with tonight's meeting. We recognize it's getting late. The newspaper head has a deadline, and it's Mr. Kyra's 30th wedding anniversary, so he wants to get home to his bride.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Bendel.
Congratulations to you and Cheryl.
Thank you.
We will move right into our next item on the agenda, which is communications. Mr. Hull.
Yes, so under communications, there's a memo to the board just noting that there is a survey that has been sent out from the Open Space and Recreation Committee. This is a committee that meets every 5 years, thereabouts, because our Open Space and Recreation Plan needs to be updated and submitted to the state so that we can remain eligible for grants. So the survey is out, it's online, it's also in hard copy at the Senior Center, at the library, and at the Town Hall. The deadline is November 8th.
Thank you.
Next, under correspondence, we have a letter from Eric Hockey, who is the new attorney that is representing New England Transrail and Wilmington Woburn Intermodal. This is the discussion that took place some time ago about the prospect of a warehousing operation, and the firm that represents Wilmington Woburn Intermodal is Clark Hill. The prior attorney passed away. This correspondence was submitted to the Surface Transportation Board in part to look for an extension on the reporting requirement, and also just noting that he has now taken over as counsel. Next under correspondence is a memo from Alicia Frazier, Director of Environmental and Epidemiology Program, Executive Office of Health and Human Services, just regarding the childhood cancer study. Essentially, unfortunately at this point, there's really no specific information to report other than that the study is still in the works. It's being reviewed by a peer review committee, and they hope to have information for us in the near future. Under correspondence, we have a letter from the Mass Lottery Commission with regard to an application at Michael's Place to obtain a Keno license. Periodically, we do receive these licenses, and essentially the way the process works is that the town, the Board of Selectmen in this case, must respond within 21 days if there is any opposition to the establishment having a Keno license. I do have a recommendation from the police chief, Joseph Desmond. Upon review, the Wilmington Police Department does not object to Michael's Place eligibility to sell Keno submitted by the following: Michael's Place, 110 Lowell Street. Next is correspondence from Minuteman Senior Services. This is an update that comes annually, and it's noting the value that the Minuteman Senior Services provides to Wilmington. They note here that over 1,591 residents of Wilmington were served, and they estimate the value of those services to be $1,577,548. We have correspondence from Paul Regan, Executive Director of the MBTA Advisory Board. And this is with regard to municipal elections. Actually, the next two pieces of correspondence deal with this. So there is an election that is coming up for seats on some of the sub-regions. Wilmington is part of the North Suburban Planning sub-region. The regions that have seats up are Metro West, which actually has two vacancies, two individuals that are running for one seat, and then also the city of Somerville running unopposed for the Inner Core sub-region, and then the town of Rockland is running unopposed for the South Shore Coalition sub-region. There's separately, but I'll take them up together. There was a letter from Thatcher Keyser, who's the Chief Operating Officer for the city of Framingham. They are one of the two towns that are seeking the Metro West seat. Also Ashland, and the letter from Mr. Keyser makes the case as to why they should retain their seat. The process for voting is either to attend the meeting on November 6th, at the MAPC fall meeting, or to submit an absentee ballot. Those ballots are due on November 5th by 5 p.m.
Thank you.
Next is correspondence from John Bullion, Chairman of the Needham Board of Selectmen. This is with regard to House Bill 3507, Housing Choice Initiative. Essentially, the request, he's making a request that the Board of Selectmen submit a letter to its legislative delegation suggesting that this bill be modified. It has to do with the requirements. Originally it stemmed from the Governor Baker's Housing Choice Initiative, basically suggesting that certain types of zoning be modified so that instead of a 2/3 vote being required to make changes to zoning, that the requirement be changed to a simple majority. The proposal that Needham is suggesting is that for those communities who are at 10% or above, have met their affordable housing requirement, that they be able to retain the 2/3 majority, and for communities who have fallen under the 10% or not yet reached 10%, that the legislation apply to them. So they're essentially looking for support of the town to write its legislative delegation. Next is an invitation from Congressman Seth Moulton to attend the 5th Annual Veterans Day Town Hall. This event is Monday, November 11th, 6 to 8 p.m., Peabody City Hall, Wigan Auditorium, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody. We have a letter from Kathleen Maloney, who is the Senior Manager at Xfinity, and it deals with some program changes. I won't go into all of them, but all of this correspondence goes out to the subscribers so that they're informed about the changes.
Thank you. We're on to board to consider. We have 3 items.
The first under board to consider is an invitation, actually a request from the Veteran Services Director, Lou Simaglia. Just read it in brief. I believe Wilmington, America's veterans are some of the nation's bravest, hardest working men and women. However, it's hard to show them the appreciation they deserve when back home and out of uniform they're more camouflaged than ever. Green Light A Vet is a campaign to establish visible national support for our veterans by changing one light to green. Green is the color of hope, renewal, and well-being. Green light is also a term commonly used to activate forward movement. The simple action of changing one light to green is intended to spark a national conversation regarding the recognition of veterans and green light them forward as a valued member of our communities. I would respectfully ask that the town of Wilmington place green lights on the town common for the month of November to show our continued support for the veterans from all eras that live in Wilmington. I would like to thank you for your consideration for this request and for your tremendous support in the past for Wilmington's veteran population.
Okay, is there a motion for the request? Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you to Lou and to all of our veterans.
Next, under Board to consider is a request to designate special counsel to represent a representative from the Fire Department, Fire Lieutenant Christopher Posey. There was a situation that was brought to my attention. Reading Municipal Light had a claim filed against it involving a downed limb in Wilmington. Christopher Posey, lieutenant for the fire department, responded as part of his regular duties, and the attorney who is representing Reading Municipal Light, actually their insurance carrier, is looking to depose Mr. Posey as a fact witness. Simply, as I understand it, to tell the attorney what he observed and what he heard at this incident. Reading Municipal Light is also represented by KP Law, and in having conversation with Mark Rich, he indicated that it would be a conflict for him to represent the town or represent the town working with Mr. Posey in this manner. So I am recommending that the law firm of Lemke and Lemke be appointed by the board for the specific purpose of assisting and representing Lieutenant Posey in this deposition, and should it be necessary, if this matter goes to trial, which it's not clear whether it will, but he is called upon as a witness, that the law firm would represent him in that manner as well. So the firm that I reference is a firm that was recommended by town council. They have served in a special counsel capacity for a number of other communities. They're also the town council in the town of Hull, and they would charge the same hourly rate as town council currently charges. So this would be just specific to this particular situation.
Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion's made. Seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Next, under board to consider is a license for the use of the Textron ball fields and tennis courts. So as you recall, there's been a fair amount of discussion about, both internally as well as from the public, about the condition of the Textron fields and the court, and a desire to pursue having access to those facilities. I've had conversations with a representative from Textron, talked about the prospect of purchasing the property. They currently wish to retain it as part of their larger piece of property. They do continue to operate there, certainly on a small scale, but to this point, they don't have any specific plans to vacate the property. Also talked about the prospect of a lease. They are not interested in a lease. The one option that was that they are amenable to is the prospect of a license. So a license is not a right of ownership. It basically is authorization to use the property. As the discussions went forward, I also had conversation with the rec director to inquire about possible groups that might be interested in using the property. As you know, you may recall, we had early on arrangements through the rec department to use the courts for pickleball. This was prior to establishing the pickleball courts we have out here. It went well, or marginally well, I guess, for a period of time, but one of the inconveniences that I think people found was that in order to access the courts, they had to report to the security office to obtain the keys to the courts, and then, obviously, check out when they were done. So we no longer use the tennis courts. I haven't for some time now for that purpose. As I understand it, the recreation director talked to the head of Little League about the prospect of using the fields for their programs. The response came back that they have adequate fields, and they are actually concerned about the condition of the fields at Textron and wouldn't want any of the kids to get injured. Conversation was also had with the athletic director at the high school, Ed Harrison, about the prospect of any use that he might have for the fields of the courts, and he has also indicated, as I understand it, that he is not looking to use the space. So, the challenge at this point, obviously, is, we can certainly, the board could enter into a license, but one of the concerns I have is spending town funds in terms of mowing the property, which in and of itself isn't a big deal, but to the extent that the town needed to make any investment of funds to make the fields playable or to seam seal the cracks in the Textron courts, since we don't own the property, we would be doing that, I guess, to some measure gratis, if you will, and where we don't have any particular use at the moment that has, or individuals that are looking to use the property, I guess I question whether there's any benefit to the town in signing a lease. So I wanted to bring this up to the board for your thoughts and feedback before pursuing it any further.
Two questions that come to my mind right off the bat is, number one, can you give us a ballpark figure on what it would cost? What are we talking about for a license here? Are we talking big dollars? We're talking really short money?
There would be no cost for the license per se. There's no charge for the license, no.
Okay, so there would be so really, the only money we would be spending is the efforts from our folks with potentially DPW or anybody else who did some work over there, correct?
Yes.
So, and then my second question or comment would be, you've indicated that at this current moment, there isn't any interest from any of the town groups to utilize that. I find it hard to believe that if that wasn't cleaned up a little bit, that it may not become a little more desirable to folks. If they knew it was available to them, if it was cleaned up, whether it was, baseball, softball, or even adult groups. There's a lot of adult groups that, softball leagues that come to mind. I find it really hard to believe that nobody would want to use that if we cleaned it up a bit. So that's just my initial thought.
Just to be clear, so one of the caveats or limitations, if you will, with the license is it has to be a town-sanctioned or sponsored group. So if, for example, the group that plays down at Town Park, that is not under the umbrella of the town, so to speak. So they would not, according to the license and the way it's set up, they would not be able to be there. It would have to be either a group affiliated with the schools or the town.
Well, I know this is really cheesy, but I'll just put it out there. I'm reminded of the famous line from the movie, "If you build it, they will come." That's just my 2 cents on it. I'll open it up to anybody else. Mr. Eaton?
Yes, I thank you, Mr. Hull, for making the point that this isn't, they're not really inviting the public to come and play a pickup game of softball or baseball or tennis or basketball, but really just more of a restricted to organizations that are affiliated with the town. Do you have some sort of cost estimate or some idea as to the level of effort that would be required to, I guess, bring that property to a usable level? Because as it is right now, it's you certainly aren't going to be playing baseball there in its current position, or in its current condition.
I do not have an estimate. We'd have to have Public Works, actually go on the property. Clearly, it's overgrown, which is, in the big scheme of things, not a big deal to get under control, at least, in terms of mowing. But I think the bigger concerns would be to the degree that that the property is rutted or so on.
Anybody else?
Just a question, what is what's the length of the licensing agreement, of the contract?
I believe it is indefinite, but, and then it's indefinite. So there is, I don't recall, well, let me just, before I commit to that, let me just confirm.
It's a long term.
Yeah, I don't think, it's either renewed on an annual basis, or it may not have it's an indefinite period, but I'd have to confirm that.
Okay, maybe I would suggest that we table this until next meeting, until we get an idea of the length of the contract and the possible cost of maintenance of the facility, and that way we can take more of an educated vote as to whether it's needed. I personally, I think it's needed. I'm a little disappointed that it's not open to the entire public, that it's just open to groups at the, that are organized groups like Little League or soccer or the high school. I wish it would be open to just the youth that want to get out there and play, but if, so be it. But I would suggest that we table until we get further information. I'll make that into a motion.
And I would just agree with Mr. Cairo on that. I would also think, even though, historically it was used as baseball and softball fields, there might be some other needs. There might be another organization, another town organization that could utilize it for practice space for a different sport. So I think it might make sense, and I guess we're doing this now just to invite, any public town organization that thinks that field would be of use to them to reach out to Mr. Hull's office before the next meeting, so that we have that information. Because I think, it might seem daunting to Little League to have to recreate the infield if it's all overgrown and the dirt's gone. But, there might be another organization in town that would love just a big open grass space that they can do practices or whatnot if, Yentile's not available to them or whatever the case might be. So I think it would be great to hear from the other organizations in town to make sure they don't have a use either.
I'll take that as a second.
Yeah.
Further discussion?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just
I
for-
thought we were already on discussion.
No problem.
I do agree with tabling it at this point. Certainly, I would anticipate hearing from some groups that they might be able to put that to use. I do think that the distinction between a lease and a license is important to keep in mind. A license is revocable, so we could invest, labor hours and money into fixing up that property with the anticipation that town groups could use it in Textron, and I'm not saying that they would, but they certainly could revoke the license, and we could have done property maintenance for them. So I think that tabling at this point is a good idea. Certainly, let's go back to our constituents and kind of hear from them, and keep channels of communication with Textron open. We certainly do for a number of other reasons, and go from there.
Yeah, real quick, Mr. Chairman, I agree in tabling it. And the other thing is, obviously, we wouldn't be doing anything this winter, so I imagine that winter will kill most all that growth, so it wouldn't be as bad to get that ball field ready, if that's what the wish of the town is at that time, so.
So we'll put the word out there that if any town group is interested, please contact Mr. Hull's, the manager's office, and let us know, or contact any of the selectmen as well. All right, so we have a motion and a second to table this discussion. There's no further discussion, we'll call for the vote. All in favor? It's unanimous to table this item. You good there, Mr. Hull?
Yes,
Okay,
yep.
thank you. All right, I did reserve a short public comment section here. Mr. West, I promised you earlier I would give you some time.
Thank you. Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. 2 quick comments. One regarding the Textron ball fields. As somebody that worked at Textron and played in those ball fields, it's a distance from the parking lot to the ball field. So if you're going to consider using the ball fields, ask Textron for a certain amount of parking so that they can park on the Textron property as opposed to trying to park. There's only that small area where the tennis courts are that probably hits 5 or 10 cars. I mean, that's great for the tennis courts, but if you're gonna use the ball fields, you're gonna need additional parking somewhere. So just a thought on that. But more importantly, to Mike, my public comments, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for reissuing public comments. As a member of both Boy Scout and Cub Scout Boy Scout Troop 136 and Cub Scout Pack 136, we're sponsored by American Legion Post 136. Why I bring this up is because in service to our veteran community, what we do is that this will be our third year. On November 9th, which is a Saturday, we've secured the Mason Hall on 32 Church Street from 11:30 to 3 o'clock. And basically what we're doing, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you've been there in the past, we're opening it up to the residents to write Christmas cards and holiday cards to hospitalized vets. This is in conjunction with the iPods for Vets organization, and we'll also be taking a collection up for anything that you could think of that vets could need, especially now that the winter months are unfortunately coming upon us. You know, warm gloves, hats, scarves, jackets, anything that, especially new, that could be given to hospitalized vets and would be given through iPods for Vets over the holiday time. So it'd be, once we give everything to them, it'd be for their use to give to the vets. But again, it's Saturday at 11:30 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon on November 9th at the Mason Hall. So we're trying to get a couple of speakers. I've been talking, like last year we had a World War II vet that was a flyer. That his plane got shot down. He was captured, captured, and freed again. I'm in the process of talking to a couple of other World War II vets, and I've also secured a woman that wrote a book on her parents' experience, and her father was a German soldier that ultimately emigrated to the United States and raised their family here in the United States. So I'm looking at a couple of other opportunities there. There'll be some light refreshments. But again, just open it up. It's free. It's a free event to the public. If somebody wants to just come down, we've got 1,000 Christmas cards, holiday cards. Somebody wants to write, hey, dear vet, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Write 10 cards, spend 15 minutes and leave. Great. If somebody wants to stay an hour or two, even better. So again, it's open to the public, and it's sponsored by both Boy Scout Troop 136 and Cub Scout Pack 136 in conjunction with the American Legion and iPods for Vets.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Mr. Ragsdale.
David Ragsdale, 18 Marion Street. I'd just like to emphasize that the Textron fields right now are also a tremendous eyesore. And whether town groups are able to use the fields or not, a license that would give the town the ability simply to mow the fields would be a great improvement right now and be worth doing, I believe, just for that alone. But I think we will probably also be able to get some use out of it. But I think that would be enough to be a great improvement to the town on one of its main thoroughfares right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move to announcements. Any board members have any big announcements? Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, I'll make something real quick, just to get to a point to it. I mean, I was with the town manager. There was obviously with the Wilmington Tewksbury Chamber of Commerce, there was a cutting ribbon of Wilmington Kitchen, and across the street, a Britt Joyce massage therapist. I did go to both, but I found something really interesting. When I was going there, I said, let me park. There's got to be some parking spots that was designated for people to park in that MBTA parking lot that faces Main Street. I pull in, and every single parking lot is taken. I go, geez, it doesn't start till, like, say, 2:30. It's 20 past 2. I'm here. I can't believe there's 15 or so people here. So I had to park illegally, and I did, unfortunately, but I had no choice. So I parked illegally. And then I'm noticing that when we went to the massage area across the street, she said, oh, I got a couple of rooms. I'm fine with one parking spot in the front. So when it was all said and done, I had mentioned something to her and say, wait a minute, we designated X amount parking spaces with that MBTA parking lot. So Jeff, I went out there and I literally counted. And I saw the arrows, but the signs are in horrible shape and it's confusing. But there was one Wilmington gentleman that was waiting for his girlfriend. He recognized who I was, and he said, I come here every week, every day to pick up my girlfriend, and these parking spaces are taken. So there are 16 parking spots, and there are 2 to the far right-hand side. It says taxi. He says, I never see a taxi, and I gotta be honest, looks like that taxi sign is a homemade sign. I could be wrong. But we need to get, I'm happy to call the MBTA, Mr. Egan, to see if we can get signage, unless that's why I'm bringing it to you, Jeff, first. If that's the case, we should have the police department down there tomorrow and tow all those cars out of there, because that was designated for customers to patronize the businesses across the street. So I said to the young lady who's had a difficult start getting it, I says, listen, I'm gonna bring this up at a selectmen's meeting, because I think we need attention to this thing. I go, you have more than one parking spot, there's many across the street. Jeff, I took pictures, probably need a little help sending it to you, but I did take some pictures. And maybe you can take a look at it tomorrow.
Yeah, I believe originally the agreement was that 10 spots would be designated for the merchants on Main Street.
But I saw the signs and I counted, there's 16 spaces. A sign has an arrow this way, sign has an arrow, but it's all blurred. It's not really written proper. I assume, well, you're saying 10. If there's 16, let's put 16.
Is it 20? Okay, it could be
Yeah.
20, but we
Yeah,
can
Jeff.
look at
Oh, yeah.
addressing that.
Thanks, yeah. I was just thinking of the poor folks across the street, you know?
Any
Thank you.
other announcements?
That's
Yeah,
it, Mr. Chairman.
Just actually a question in that regard. And the signs that you saw, did it say 20-minute parking, 30-minute parking?
I
on
took
the sign?
pictures. It said something about, I don't know, it could have been 2 hours. I forget. I did take the pictures. I don't have my phone with me. But needless to say, even if it's 20 minutes parking, I was there, you know, taking my time, taking pictures, and I was there about a half hour. None of those cars moved. So if that's 20-minute parking, you're probably
Yeah,
very
I
right.
know.
I was there about a half hour, and that's the truth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just an announcement, Mr. Bendel, you alluded to it earlier, I probably would get in trouble if I didn't say happy anniversary to my wife. And I did send her an emoji, you know, happy anniversary. I think that's what you call it, so. She's, I don't know what she's doing. She's playing Scrabble, I think, with her friends, so. Okay, that was it.
God
We're
bless
still
her.
together.
Congratulations to you. Cheryl, my condolences. Any announcements?
Congratulations to Mr. Kyra and his wife, Mrs. Kyra. I think we might be able to send you home a little bit earlier than anticipated tonight, so congratulations to you too.
Pick up some ice cream or something.
Yes.
Taco basket is closed.
So just two things. I wanted to first thank you, Mr. Chair, for having us wear pink this month. And I think it coincides nicely with the fact that we're not going to be together again until after Veterans Day. So I wanted to take a moment to thank our veterans and their families, again, as kind of the daughter-in-law, and wife of a veteran. I appreciate all the sacrifice that they make to serve our country, as well as their families make, their children, their spouses, their parents make for them to serve our country. And there's a different type of warrior that, you know, we've been honoring and recognizing this month, and people who have breast cancer, people who have survived it, people who have succumbed to it. So I wanted to let those warriors know that we're thinking of you, and hopefully this was just a small token that we could do to show you that we appreciate the fight that you're going through every day as well. So thank you for doing that for us, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I just have two announcements myself, just to piggyback on Mrs. O'Mahony. Certainly, Wilmington takes great pride in its Veterans Day ceremonies, and I want to give its due diligence and plug. I know the manager will bring it up under important dates, but it is worth repeating that on Veterans Day, on the 11th, at the 11th hour, 11 a.m., we'll gather on the town common. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that whether it's rain or shine, we usually get a huge crowd. Nothing but the best for our veterans and our heroes. So I would urge all of you to join us on that day as we celebrate all veterans. So thank you for bringing that up. And lastly, I don't know about you folks, but oftentimes people will ask me about trick-or-treating, which is coming up on Thursday. It may rain, it may not. But just to be clear, we don't technically have specific trick-or-treating hours. We don't think town government should get involved in when you go trick-or-treating, but we just want to urge everybody to trick-or-treat responsibly and be safe out there, and please be careful driving. There'll be a lot of kids out, and hopefully the rain will hold off for them, and hope everybody will enjoy themselves. That's all I have for announcements. We'll move into new business. If there's any new business, seeing none, we'll go right to important dates to finish up.
Important dates, October 30th, the brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. October 30th is also a Economic Development Committee meeting, Town Hall, Room 9, 7 p.m. Same evening is the Ice Rink and Recreation Facility Committee, Town Hall Auditorium, 7 p.m. October 31st, as was noted, Halloween. November 2nd, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. November 3rd, turn clocks back to, and check your smoke, your detector batteries. November 3rd, Herndon Tavern Open House, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. November 3rd, Shawshene Tech Community Open House, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. November 4th through December 6th is the curbside collection of yard waste. Drop-offs, again, are occurring on the 6th and the 9th of November, Old Main Street, the first being 8 to 2 and the second being 9 to 4. Then Veterans Day is on the 11th, 11 a.m. Town offices are closed. Board of Selectmen meet again on November 12th, 7 p.m., room 9. Brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the 13th, and again on the 16th, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Brush drop-off on the 20th, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. November 21st, the next Elderly Services Commission meeting, the Bazell Senior Center, 1:30. November 23rd, Shawshene Tech Craft Fair, 100 Cook Street, Billerica, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. November 23rd, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Selectmen's meeting again on the 25th, meeting at 7 in room 9. Also on November 25th, discussion of local property tax policy with reference to classification for fiscal 20, Board of Selectmen's meeting, Town Hall, room 9, 7 p.m. November 27th, brush drop-off, Old Main Street, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. November 28th is Thanksgiving. Town Hall is closed, as it is on the 29th. And then November 30th is another brush drop-off, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion's made, second, all in favor? Unanimous. Good night, everyone. Thank you.